Thank you, ladies. That was absolutely beautiful. I love it when I meet people who are passionate about their calling. Anyone who loves the Lord and is in the Lord's work and is passionate about that, it's exciting to be able to hear from those people. Today we are blessed. We've had such a long running relationship with Mark Wakefield and his ministry in Guatemala. He'll be telling you all about that in just a few moments, or I don't know that he can actually tell you all about it, but he can tell you a bit about it. And so I hope that you are blessed as you hear what's going on in his ministry and maybe how you can plug in. Our church has been a part of his ministry for quite some time. We've had several folks who have gone down and tried to help out, and sometimes I know how it is, Mark, when you're on mission trips, sometimes you try to help out, but you just get in the way, and then there are times when you go to help out and it really does work out. So I'm so thankful for that. Mark, in just a few moments after a video, we'd love for you to come and share with us how God is using your ministry and how he is using you in particular, but we do appreciate you being here with us today. Mark Wakefield will be our guest speaker today.
face I see, my pain no more. to see. I bow my life, I'll fix my eyes on Christ, my King. I bow my life, I'll fix my eyes on Christ, my King.
Good morning. See who I know out there. It's good to see y'all. It's good to be back, be able to share a little bit. I want to share this morning just a little bit about what we've experienced this past year and a half, really 2 years. I am thankful for COVID. It has whooped us. It has changed. It has changed a lot of things that need to be changed. It's still changing a lot of things that need to be changed. It's changing a lot of people. It's changing church, shaking church real hard and filtered out a lot of people, sadly enough. It has moved rocks and stones and things that we've held on to. I got in trouble. I talk about it. Y'all are not recording this right. I can talk about my mama, and y'all don't tell. Y'all a bunch of tattletales. My mom used to say when I was a kid, I would say, well, the whole world. And she said, no, not the whole world. Well, this time, the whole world has been shaken. And it's made everybody stop and think. And what I love about it is it's made everybody can die. Who's next? We used to sit and play that at church. Be like, look at him. He's old. He's going to die. He won't be here next week. Watch. We bet money on it. But with COVID all of a sudden, it could be any of us. Well, not him. He's wearing his mask. Everybody else. You're good. It's really changed our perspective on the world. And it changed our perspective on missions. And a lot of people said, well, we want to do a mission trip. It ain't going to happen. So now what do we do? And if I was going to title what I was going to share this morning anything, it would be, let's work. Because what I've seen is a lot of people work and a lot of people sit still. When I was here September, October, November of 2019. And when I was here, I began to pray and ask God, okay, what's next? To prepare myself for what is going to happen in our ministry, what's going to happen in our home, how we need to work with the boys, what changes we need to make, what changes I need to make. And there were some things in my life that I really was wanting to change, and I hadn't been able to figure out how to do that. And so I began to pray, and God said, I want you to come back to the U.S. And I said, well, 6 weeks. And he said, 10, 6, 10, 8, 10. I came back for 10 weeks. But one of the things God told me to do was to say goodbye to a lot of people. He said, when you come back next time, a lot of things are going to have changed. And I said, well, and he said, the church is going to be a lot more empty. You're going to, a lot of the homes you're going to visit, there are going to be less people there. And so God kind of prepared me for that. And I said, okay, well, when I come back to the U.S. next fall, and God said, you're not coming back. And I'm a great missionary. I really am. I said, well, let me think about it and get back with you on that. And last year, it wasn't going to happen. I could have come back. I'm not sure I could have gotten back in Guatemala. God said, you need to tell people you love them. And when I went back, I said, well, what's ministry going to look like? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to focus on? And so when I went back to Guatemala, God said, stockpile food. I wasn't sure what that was about. So we, bought the food, normal things we had, and began to stock. And God said, more food. You need more. Put in more. Add in more. Buy bigger sacks of food. And there was another ministry, and I was talking to them, and he said, we have sacks of beans and sacks of rice and sacks of sugar and sacks of milk. We have all these. How much do you need? And I'm like, oh, we'll take one of each. And God said, more. Okay, whatever. So we began to stockpile food in our house and stack food, and we filled barrels with food. And God said, I want you to pay off debt. Well, I never have much debt. God said, pay off what you have. Take care of everything you have. We owed on our hens or on our laying hens, and so we paid off laying hens. And God said, buy more. So we bought more and paid that off, and We also had 2 vehicles broke down, motorcycles broke down. God said, fix that, take care of that. I said, okay, so we went to shop, and the motorcycle was on its last leg. And I said, well, what do we do? And the guy said, well, it's going to cost you, almost $2,000 to fix it. And I said, okay, fix it. So we fixed it, fixed the cars, and God said, stash cash. And I was like, we don't have cash. He said, you need to have cash. So we began to store cash and pull cash out of the banks. Had less money in the saving account, took money out, began to stash. I'm like, whoa. The boys were like, yeah. I'm like, no, you don't. So bought a little vault and began to stick money and store money and stash cash in that. I'm like, what are we doing? We began to plan about ministry, and one of the things that we wanted to do with the boys is do mission trips. And I had promised the year before that I was going to go and be a Bible teacher at a Bible institute out in the middle of nowhere. And so I was praying about that, and I said, okay, I'm going to do that, and begin to plan and do my program, and we're going to go out every 6 weeks. And every trip out, I was going to take boys with me, and then we planned 2 mission trips during the year. I said, that's what we're going to go here, and we're going to go here. We're going to work with these other ministries, and we're going to bless them because my boys need to work too. They need to work. I don't just see sit there. They need to be involved in ministry. They need to learn to serve others. So it's okay, this is what we're going to do, and we had our great plan. And so that was January, February, March, boom, COVID hit, and everything came to a stop. And suddenly the world was a different place. The first time I'd ever thought all of my boys could get sick and die. I never thought that before. Well, sometimes when I was mad, it's like, God. But they could all get sick. We could all end up with COVID. Our communities began to shut down. Highways were blocked. There were police blockades, military blockades, community blockades. There was a big checkpoint in our community to be able to get into the city. We had to go through. And they had all kinds of incredible things like point machine guns at you and check your temperature and put alcohol on your hands and spray your car tires with bleach. Genius. We had to do that every time we went into town, and so that began to complicate our life. And then stores began to shut down, and things began to shut down. It's like, man, now what? And people said, do you have food? And I'm like, actually, I got a ton of food. Do you have money? Yeah. We had our vehicles working. And what do you do? And a lot of ministries, what they did was stop, lock down. And we had that option, and we were praying about that. I said, well, maybe we just need to lock ourselves in our house and avoid the world. But then we began to realize that there's a whole world of people out there, and there are people who don't have jobs, and we have a lot of boys that are out and about, and all our older and out, 62 older and out guys that we keep up with, and their families, and grandmothers raising grandkids. And I began to realize that if God had blessed us, it was for something. If you look at James chapter 1, verses 2 and on, it says this: consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. We got that. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood that test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. We are blessed when we persevere. And right now with COVID, that changed everything in our world. And so as a home, we began to make decisions. And one of the things that happened was the Bible Institute, their communities shut down. A lot of the communities, they locked their communities down. Nobody in, nobody out. It actually protected them for a long time, too. It really helped. And so we weren't able to go there. Some of the other plans and things that we had plans we had made, we weren't able to fulfill. We weren't able to do that. So what do? It was really interesting to see what churches continued meeting, what churches adapted, what churches went to social media, to video, to audio, to doing things on Facebook to protect their people. And so that was their strategy. And each church and each congregation had strategies. But when it came to ministries, the same thing happened. And it was amazing. Some of the ministries that had incredible resources said, you know what? We're going to wait. We actually got a new sponsor because of that, because they sponsor some charities that belong to a group, and they contacted those charities, and all those charities said, we're shut down. When COVID is over, we will begin working again. And so they got mad and said, well, then we're going to support you. So we got a new sponsor out of that. But things changed. And so as a home, we had to adapt. We said, okay, we either lock ourselves down and we protect ourselves, or we find areas of ministry. For the most part, our boys were at home. They did not go out. But we did have 3 teams. It was Eric and whoever was running second with him, normally Santiago. David, who's the ranch manager, who y'all probably heard about for years. He had Romeo. He said, I'm going to work with Romeo. And Yair, who was just turned 14, he just now turned 15, he was with me. And so we said, all right, let's go. Let's get to work. What can we do? And so we began to make lists. We began to say, who are the people that we are in charge of? Who are the people who we need to be responsible for? Who are people who no one else is going to worry about, nobody else is going to take care of? God gave us some new names and some new families, but we had a lot of families, made our list, and just began to call through and talk to people and say, how are you? How can we help you? What do you need? One of the interesting things that we found is that a lot of these families lost their jobs. Like there was nowhere to work. There was no work. We had curfews, rolling curfews, quarantines. And so what was happening was the government was saying from 6 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, no one goes out. And then they would say from 6 o'clock Friday afternoon to 6 o'clock Monday morning, no one. Everything was just dead silent. Stores, restaurants, everything shut down. So people were beginning to have problems finding resources, finding food, finding the basic things they need. And so we began to look at that and say, well, what do we have and how can we help these people out? And God began to open the door for us to do that. And sometimes just calling families. And I called one mother and she was sobbing on the phone. And she said, we've been praying and praying and praying. She said, please tell me you got an answer. I said, what do you need? She said, we need food. We can do that. So we began to use a motorcycle to deliver food and go out and share, minister to people, pray with people. Sometimes they need medication. Sometimes they needed a connection with a doctor or with someone. What's interesting is a lot of our doctors did shut down. They said, we're not going to deal with sick people. We want to live. Our primary care doctor was one of the first people in our area to die of COVID. He died almost immediately as soon as it started. And so that sent me spiraling. I was like, oh no, now what? And so recently we had another doctor who has a small hospital, a private hospital, who has private dental clinic, has a whole bunch of different resources available to him. He was in a meeting with one of the people who supports us, and he said, we've been praying, we want to support a ministry. And he said, you should support Mark. So they contacted me. We have a new hospital on board, and so any of the medical needs and things that we need as a home, he said, we'll take care of anything. You call me. If I cannot do it, I will tell you, but if you need any help, we're there for you. So I was like, yes, God is good. And so we began to pray, but as things affected here, our support dropped drastically. And I've been praying about that for years. One of the things I've been praying is that the Guatemalans in our community would really stand up and really support. Last time I returned, it was probably at the end of November of 2019. I was part of a group of men's Bible study groups. I've been participating with them for probably 15 years. And they started this conversation. It's probably 60 business leaders, doctors, lawyers from our community. And as we talked, they always said, well, we support Mark. And the leader of this whole crew confronted them. And one of the questions was, well, why do you have to go to the United States and fundraise? Why do you have to go to other places to look for support when we support you? And this leader confronted them and said, okay, how much do you give? Oh, yeah, no, yeah is not an answer. How much do you? And one by one, they took them out. And he said, so everybody says you support, but you actually don't. And so when our support dropped probably 90% here in the U.S., in the last year, our support has risen probably 90% in Guatemala. Been a huge blessing. And one of the things that they said is, they said, well, what are we supposed to do? I said, let's work. We're working. They said, well, why are you giving food out? You're the poor and the orphaned. Well, because God's blessed us with enough food, we can support other people. Why do you do missions? Why not? But you should be receiving missionaries. We can also go work. Why are y'all so busy? Why are y'all keeping up with all these families? Aren't there other people who should be doing that? No, we should be doing that. Well, what happens if 2 churches and 2 ministries take food to the same widow? Good for her. Good for her. She's got support. You may have enough if we don't take enough. And so God began to bless us with people who began to say, what are you doing? We're working. What are you doing? No. Sounds like a country conversation, doesn't it? Nothing. You playing anything? No, just seeing what'll pop up. That's not how it works, Randall, is it? You actually have to plant something. And so we began to go out and work. We had to go through the checkpoints. All kinds of cool things. They are big on taking your temperature. Point the little thing at your, And we went in a bank not too long back, and they had one of those little stands where you walk up and you scan it. And so we walked in and walked past the scanner, and the guard about shot us. No, scan. I'm like, went back. Tick, tick. And the temperature was 22, which is, what is that, Celsius? So in Fahrenheit, it would be like, 58. He's like, good, next. 56, good, next. And so they'd obviously told him, as long as it's below, like 90-something or whatever, you're alive, you're good. But we had all these things, but we were going through the checkpoints, and one of the first times that I went out and pulled up to the first checkpoint, military with machine guns and your police and a bunch of community leaders standing around, they're full at that point, they're full suits and gloves, and roll your window down, roll the window down. Hey, Mark, where are you going? Into town. Oh, cool. You got guys with you? Yeah. Oh, okay, come on through. Pray for your missionaries. Because as things progress, they just wave us through. Wave us through. And in town, I think, I was trying to figure out the other day, because I didn't mark it down. I realized one day it was happening. There were police checkpoints and a lot of checkpoints in the city as well. And they were stopping and picking on people. And sometimes we would have all the guys in the vehicle, and you're only supposed to have 4 people. I'd have like 12 people crammed in the SUV. And we were going into town. One day I realized every checkpoint, they were stopping everybody, especially the motorcycles. We were on a motorcycle with the Yair, and they waved us through. Probably a year I wasn't stopped at any of the checkpoints. They would stop everybody, they just wave us on through. God opened doors. And so we began to do ministry, and we began to look for people to bless and people to work with. And so other churches and other organizations began to call us and say, we can't find any needy people. Can we give you food? I'm like, okay. We have people we can help. And people within our community and people around us who we knew needed help. Some of the elderly and people who simply did not have anyone to check in on them and pray for them. One of the families, we had 2 families who have AIDS. They're way past the HIV point. They are incredibly sick, and the only reason they are still alive is because they pray like crazy people. But we were going in and visiting them, and that was one of the houses was the one that worried me the most. They have tuberculosis and then herpes and and we were going and visiting them, and she would always sit there and cry and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. We don't see anyone. We're locked in our home. We don't see anyone. We would take them food and pray with them. And it blessed me, but I would talk to the air and be like, man, it scares me. We go out, alcohol gel, everything, and shake us up a little bit. But you know what? That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to work. And it's interesting because with COVID, a lot of ministries shut down. They said, we're not going to work. But as we begin to work and as we begin to involve other people, God began to work, and God's laid the next plans on our heart and what we're supposed to do next, which scares me. I'm worried about it. Inside, I think, man, for real? Because it's a big project, but we're going to build a rehab center. The idea behind that is probably 70% of the kids we get offered have problems with drugs and alcohol. And so we try to connect them with a rehab, which many times there is not a rehab. We try to connect them with a rehabilitation facility, and we need a place where we can help transform these lives. And our house is not equipped for that. So when we looked at remodeling part of the house or finding a way to do it there, and it's not the right place for that. And so we've been working on doing that and sharing that with people in our community. And we've had doubts. I've had so many doubts about that because I'm like, God, we're coming out of a pandemic. Our financial donations have dropped significantly, and will people really back us up? But time and time again, God's shown us that's the direction we're supposed to go. We've looked at property and about purchasing more property, purchasing property in another place. We found a place that was absolutely gorgeous, which I loved, and God said no. And so as we've prayed about that, God's began to point us in the direction of building it on the land we already own. So we have a place. It's close to our house, but out of sight, out of mind, on our property. And we began to pray and say, well, what are we supposed to do with that? So one day, I'm talking to a guy we had interviewed to be the youth, the director for the rehabilitation program. And he said, I want to meet with my wife. She's a prayer warrior. And we came and sat down at this little restaurant, and we were talking. And she said, I don't know. She said, I doubt, because where are you going to get the money for this? I said, I don't know. And she said, well, I can pray about it, but I just don't see it happening. And then she said, unless God does miracles. And I said, well, God does miracles with us all the time. And I'm sitting there, and another businessman, very wealthy businessman, walks in with his family, waves and sits down at the table, and he keeps looking over at me. I look over at him, and he keeps looking over at me, and he wants me to go say hi. So I get up, walk over, and he gets up and says, I'm glad you came over to say hi to me. I need to talk to you about something. Do you know my family? And I said, no, nice to meet you, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. And he said, I have a whole bunch of steel that maybe you could use for something, and I want you to come out and look at it. And I said, steel for what? And he goes, oh, just like steel beams, and would you be interested in that? I said, yeah. And he said, who are you talking to? And I said, come over. I want to introduce you. So we went over and talked, and he said, yeah, I'm offering him some steel. And she was looking at me, and she said, what? And I said, he's got a bunch of steel he wants us to look at. So he said, why don't you come over, just drive over, and I have a lot, which is huge, probably the size of this church property. And we went over there. It's fenced. It has security guards. It's got a huge wall around it. And we pull into this place, and it looked like they bought the Cleveland Mall. Is that what it's called up here? It looked like they bought that, took it apart, and stacked it in his lot. And I said, what's that? He said, was out one night with some friends, and we went and had tacos, and we were sitting around talking, and then we went out to where the old gold mine was, and they bought a Canadian gold mine is what they bought. They bought out all the equipment, all the buildings, everything, the huge generator tractors, the whole thing. They said, well, you can have it for X amount, which I don't know how much he paid for it. He's like, okay. He said, what are you going to do with it? Oh, I don't know. You know people that go to auctions to do stuff like that, right? What are you going to do with it? Oh, stick it in the barn. Yeah. And he just had it all piled up. So we've been conversing with him recently. And he said, could you build your rehab center out of that? Yes, I could. God's going to provide. Another lady called me and said, I want to talk to you. She said, I have a donation for you. And I said, what is it? She said, it's 4 buckets of paint. And so I went by myself, which I almost never do. I was in the truck going to the meeting, and I ditched Jair, and I was supposed to pick up Romeo and didn't pick up Romeo. And so I was by myself, and I pull in her little warehouse. She said, I want to give you 4 buckets of paint. I want to give you those 4 buckets and those 4 buckets and those 8 buckets. And if you want to take all these over here, you can as well. And I have this table, you want that. And so I'm just carting stuff, and I'm getting filthy. I have a meeting, and I'm always dirty, nasty. Because I end up carting a bunch of stuff out of an old warehouse. And so all these buckets of paint stuff in the back, she says, oh, there's this pile of boxes that rats have made nests in. It's nasty. We need 15 toilets for the rehab center for the design we have now, 15 toilets and 15 sinks. And she had 15 brand new sinks that she never sold in her business. And she said, do you want those? And so when I end up at my next meeting, I'm just nasty with rats poop all over me. And I think the only person to understand that problem is Dakota Davis. You understand that? All covered in cow stuff and milk. All nasty to my next meeting. And the guy's like, dude, why do you always show up like that? Like it's God's fault. He's like, do you not own clean clothes? And I'm like, and we were talking about rehab stuff, and he's like, dude, why do you have so many bathrooms? And I said, well, I was wondering if we needed that many bathrooms. 15 toilets and 15 sinks. But since God just gave me 15 sinks, I think we're good. Time and time again, God provides and blesses us. But He blesses us so we can be a blessing to others. He blesses us so we can provide for others. And when things happen, it says, whenever you face trials of many kinds, whenever you face difficulties, whenever you face, it says trials and difficulties, when you face tribulations, when you face people attacking you, there's a reason behind it. We're supposed to work. It builds our faith. We're supposed to be active. We can sit and wait for people to come along. That's what some of these other ministries have done. They're sitting there, and I'm like, what are you sitting there for? They said, well, we can't do the ministry we came here to do. You can't do the ministry you think you went there to do. But there are other areas of ministry. There's a huge need. And if you want to be busy, if you want to be active, there are areas to be active. As we prayed as a home, the boys came to me one night and they said, we were talking and they said, one of the boys we had in the home at that point, we'd had 19 boys throughout last year, and then we were actually building a house for another ministry. Some of y'all kept up with that. We were building that, and so at one point we had 18 people working for that project. And a lot of those guys, because of all the lockdowns and curfews and roadblocks and everything else, they were living at our house. And so we had all these guys at the house. But one of the guys we had at the house, his name was Jonathan, and he said, he was a whiner. Oh, he's driving me crazy. He said, you promised us stuff, and you're a liar. I said, okay, go. You said we were going to be able to go to swimming pools each weekend. All the pools have been shut down for a year. Next. You said we were going to be able to go out and eat as a family all the time. All the restaurants are shut down. Next. He said, well, you promised us, and we were talking, we were going to do a mission trip this year. I'm like, and they're like, yeah, you promised us a trip. We were all excited about that. And I'm like, fools. We've been on a mission trip almost every day for the past 18 months. Every day we've been working. Every day we've been going. And we've been handing out food, tons of food. And yet you guys still eat like pigs. Sorry, Dakota. Oh, you don't have pigs. Yeah, what cows? Y'all been eating. We've never lacked anything. God has provided. But because we've listened, and we've been faithful to listen, we've been faithful to pray, and we've been faithful to give generously to every single person who's come to our home and said, we need food, or we need milk, or we need whatever, we've been able to help with that. And when we took on Lynn Ann Murphy's project, building her house, we were able to give work because one of the main complaints we got with people when we went to their houses, which I don't know if you get that here in America. I don't think so. We would walk into people's houses and say, what do you need? And they would say, pray that we can find work. We will work. We want to work. We want jobs. So when we had offer, I kept saying, well, we don't have jobs. We started building in Ann's house. Boom. We had work. We could put people to work. And they were willing to work. Time and time again, God provided and blessed us with things. When I went back in November of 19, one of the things God told me to do was we were having problems with the internet provider at the house and my cell phone provider, and we were paying like $150 a month. And so they cut our service, and they said, well, your contract's up. We're going to continue it for like $200 and something a month, which down there is a lot. I was like, no, you're not. And so one of my boys said, well, why don't you go to the other company? So I went to the other company. The other company said, we will, what do you have? And I said, well, I need 10 megas or whatever of internet. And they said, well, we have a plan. We can give you 150. I was like, huh? How much is that going to cost me? For $25 a month, we can give you that, and we give you free cable. And a buddy of mine said, I'll give you a TV. I don't know how a TV. I'll give you a TV. And I was praying about it, and God said, this is what you need to do. This is the plan you need to do. And I'm like, well, it makes financial sense. And God said, go ahead and get the 150 and get cable and get the channels they'll offer you. So, well, how many channels? They're like, oh, it's like 80-something channels. I'm like, okay, I don't want the boys having cable. So when I went back, that's one of the things I did was I worked that out, signed up in January, signed up, got the new plan, got the new cable. February, March, put TV up, connected cable to it. March, boom, by April, all the schools are shut down. All the boys were at home, and we were having to homeschool. They were doing homework off of Zoom, off of Facebook, off of WhatsApp, all that internet came in handy. And then the boys that were in community schools, the government began to do community programs and put them on the national TV channels. We didn't even have a lot of local TV channels. And so they said, we need you to watch each boy. Like, for example, Joel and Jorge, they had to watch each morning from like 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning. They had programs they had to watch. I had TV. They said, we want you to watch nature programs. Well, there's Nat Geo. Watch an hour of that. God even took care of the cable. See, God takes care of stuff, but he wants us to work. He wants us to do and to be active and to go out and seek. If people don't come here to this church, then we need to go out and find them. There are people who cannot leave their homes. There are people who are starving and people who are needy. We need to work. And trials, they build our faith. And this last year and a half, it's built our faith. And I'm ready. I'm excited about what God has in store for this next year and a half. I'm going to build a rehab center. Yay. Still don't know how it's going to all come together, but it is. God is going to provide, and he is going to make a way. Let me pray for you all this morning. Before I finish up, I brought bracelets, prayer bracelets. They're not holy prayer bracelets from Israel or anything like that. They're unholy prayer bracelets from Guatemala. A little prayer card, and I have prayer cards up front here, here in front as well. The idea behind these is just to give you something that you can wear, stick in your Bible, wear as earrings. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but the idea is to give you something to remember to pray for missionaries. Pray because the struggles are real. This year's been tough. It has been hard. Many missionaries have left the field. That's what we talked about this morning in Sunday school. Many missionaries have really had to struggle and decide what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and if they're going to continue on the mission field. Many people today continue serving all over the world, but even here in the United States. Some people here have just said, you know what, we're going to focus here. If we can't be in Guatemala, we're going to minister to Guatemalans here. I was in a community outside of Knoxville this week, a community called Lawndale, a very, very poor community. It has white drug dealers. It has African-American gangs and problems that come many times in those poorest of communities. And then it probably has a 45% Kanjobal community that are Indians up north of me in Guatemala. And there are a ton of them. And they are trying to figure out how to reach them and win them over. And they said, we don't have to go to Guatemala. I said, no, you don't. You have them right here. And so who are in your community? I'm seeing a lot more Mexican restaurants, so I'm pretty sure y'all have Mexicans. A lot of people here in the community that need to know Christ. Let me pray for y'all this morning. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be here, to be able to share again. Father, we need to work. We need to get to work. There's so many things that we can do, so many people that we can bless and minister to, so many people that are waiting for someone to come and share your hope and your love with them. And during the times of COVID, so often it was just sitting down face to face with families and listening to their story or hearing them cry or praying with them personally, visiting their homes. I thank you that you blessed us ahead of time so we had food to be able to provide. I thank you for orphan resources, for our dentists, for everybody who worked so hard to provide us and keep us flowing with food, for the churches that were pouring food into our home and providing us with sacks of food to be able to take out into communities of people in need. I thank you for missionaries who are still working right now, who are finding oxygen concentrators and generators and oxygen tanks and all kinds of things for people who have COVID. I pray for the missionaries that are struggling, who have lost family members during this time. Those that are sick, I pray for Darren Wanda. She's not doing well. I pray for missionary family in Quiche, who is also, she is probably not going to make it through this week. And he's just trying to figure out what to do with 2 young children in the middle of a mission field. Help us to be sensitive to the needs that are around us. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen.